They always say things are easier to remember and memorize if you group them in threes, right? So that's what we're going to try to do in a couple places with you today. So if you look at this today, how do we affect that sign up to 90 days? Well, it's three things that we want you to remember: simplicity, personalization, and digitalization. You notice how I have to enunciate that? But, that first one there, Dan and I have, with a lot of our new conversations we've been having with people, talked about simplicity being a strategy.
Well, Rich, I think as we've talked about this quite often, simplicity really has to be, especially with, the amount of information that's flowing around, just the information people are bogged down with in their day-to-day lives, right? And then our, competitors in the gig economy in general, everyone is trying to move to that simplistic approach of, reducing that cognitive load or the mental capacity or the thought process, whatever it is, to earn that dollar. And so, I think simplicity is a very important way that kind of helps us set the stage, and the reasoning why personalization and digitalization really is so important.
You're right, Dan, on that simplicity. So if we think about it, we've got brand new distributors out there who are coming on board. They have life to start with. They may have another job. They may, as the statistics are telling us, have another gig opportunity that they're engaged in, right? Because 66, 67% last we looked, Dan, right, on people who are engaged in multiple gigs. So think about it. You are lucky if they will give you a couple hours out of their week to focus on your business. So that's, that number one, that might be number one. That might be why it's listed first, right? Is how can you make it easy to sign up? How can you make it easy to do their business? How can you make it easy for them to be successful?
Well, and I think that ties directly into personalization, because as soon as we start talking about simplicity, what makes things simplicity? And that's, narrowing down and only showing what is important to me, right? And is that, hey, look, I set a financial goal for myself. So maybe it's a smaller goal than maybe somebody else. And so do I need as much interaction and touch points, or maybe I have a different pathway for my first 90 days than somebody else. But again, that personalization is, when I get an activity or I get something that the system would like me to do, is it relevant to me? Does it have the needed context to explain to me why I'm actually getting it? And all of that ties into play to really reduce that mental capacity needing. I don't have to sit there and say, well, why am I getting this? Or, hey, look, there's a really cool graph, but what am I supposed to do with this, right? Like, how am I supposed to break this apart and then identify from this graph what I'm supposed to do? When we get into this personalization, we really need to make sure that we are, informing those, distributors that, what specifically we want them or what the organization would like them to do. But it does have to have that context. It does have to have that meaning behind it so that it is much more personalized.
Well, and I will say, so what I hear you saying, right, is it's not a one size fits all approach, because it may be where I'm at in my life, what I want out of my business, just all kinds of things. So if I'm going to go back to the hospital analogy, you and I both come to the emergency room, right? You've just run over your foot with a lawnmower. I've just gotten stung by a bee. They're not going to apply the same assistance to us as we walk through that door. So the same thing with your systems, right? How can we help someone be successful no matter who they are and what they want out of their business? So I'm going to talk a little bit, Dan, you talked about the gig economy. I think that fourth bullet point there, right? People expect high tech today. Make it easy on my phone, sign up, do my business, get my results, follow up, whatever that might be. So here, you'll notice in the bullet points we've got bolded: simplicity, personalization, and digitization. Digitization, I think I misspelled that. It's got the word app in quotes, right? And we did that for a reason. So Dan, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about, people want an app, right? Their company needs an app. What do they need?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, Rich. I mean, I think that every organization is struggling. Maybe struggling, maybe not. We definitely do see some great stories out there, but really meeting that consultant, that distributor, where they are at, in their technology life, right? And does it necessarily need to be an app? Does it just need to be, a mobile web platform? When we start talking with organizations that have large global footprints, we start talking about, well, how good of a device are they utilizing in, maybe a different country? And how much access does that phone have to be able to download content or have to be able to store that application? There's a lot of these things that come into play when we start to look at a global experience around digitalization and how people are going to interact with this technology. So we have to, and as you look at this onboarding experience, these first 48 hours, 90 days, we really have to take a look and say, okay, how can we best meet them where they are at? And then at the same time, how can we provide all of this in a single user experience? Because if we're saying, hey, look, it's hard enough maybe for them to download an application, why are we trying to provide two? And so what we really want to try to do again is really meet them where they're at, understand where they're at. Again, maybe in the States, maybe a little bit different than globally, where technology, we have to meet them again where they are at in their whole experience.
So I think our listeners might find it interesting that, so Rallyware customers, they have the ability to choose browser-based native apps, that type of thing. Some of our largest customers who have hundreds of thousands of representatives across the globe in dozens and dozens of countries still deliver their Rallyware platform, whatever they call it, as that browser-based, even though they can tell from their metrics and analytics that they've got 92%, 95%, 96% doing their business on their phone, this percentage in iOS, this percentage in Android. So it's not necessarily you have to have something from an app store, but it's exactly what Dan said. Whatever device I choose to carry, you've got to be able to do business on that device with them.
Right.